We're going to be starting off with a quick welcome and introductions. We'll then give you an overview of the civil forfeiture process and the civil forfeiture grant program. We'll then look at the funding streams and criteria for this year, and then give you some helpful tips that'll aid your application process. We'll give you an overview as well as how the funding decisions are made, what the timelines for the grant process are, and then what is the process for getting feedback after the fact. And then we'll end it with an opportunity for you to ask whatever questions you may have. Now, we are the Community Safety and Crime Prevention Branch with the Ministry of Public Safety and Solicitor General, and we're the ones responsible for developing and implementing this funding program. It's quite the process to deliver this funding program on a yearly basis. So we have a fairly large team of individuals to make sure everything goes smoothly, and everything from developing the streams to reviewing proposals to making recommendations on who we fund. Okay, so my name is Brett Banks. I'm the lead for the Civil Forfeiture Program. I have Poonam Bajwa here, and she's responsible for handling the technical aspects today to make sure everything kind of runs smoothly behind the scenes. But I also have the team leads here. So each stream has its own team lead that's responsible for managing the application process for that stream. They're going to speak to their specific streams in this presentation. So starting off my left here, I have.
Oh yeah, good afternoon everybody. My name is Claire Whelan Sadike. I'm a program manager here in the branch in the community programs unit, and I'm going to be leading the restorative justice stream this year.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Dana Greening, and I'm also a program manager. And this year, I will be leading the human trafficking stream for the civil forfeiture.
Hi, everyone, and I'm Wendy Potter. I'm also a program manager here, and I will be leading the sexual assault and domestic violence stream.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah Rahimi. I'm also a program manager, and I'm heading the Indigenous Healing and Rebuilding stream.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Now, next slide, slide 5. Just going to give you some background on the civil forfeiture process. The BC Civil Forfeiture Office has been operating since 2006, and it operates on the authority of the Civil Forfeiture Act. The Civil Forfeiture Act regulation allows the Director of Civil Forfeiture to initiate civil court proceedings against property believed to be the instruments or proceeds of unlawful activity. Now, the Civil Forfeiture Office is self-funding, so once all internal expenses are met, what remains can be spent to compensate victims and support local crime prevention and remediation efforts. So basically, why we're here today. Now, the Crime Prevention and Remediation Grant Program is administered by us in collaboration with the Civil Forfeiture Office. Each year, we determine what our priority areas are through consideration of government's current priorities and various strategic initiatives. The value of civil forfeiture grants can fluctuate from year to year based on a variety of factors, but mostly depending on how much proceeds are able to be gathered from the various civil proceedings that take place throughout the year. Okay. To date, the office has dispersed well over $33.5 million in grants for crime prevention and victim compensation payments. Now, moving on to slide 7. The streams for the 2018-2019 version of the Civil Forfeiture Program, there's 6 of them. First, we got the Crime Reduction and Crime Prevention stream. We have the Indigenous Healing and Rebuilding stream. We have the Serving Victims to Restorative Justice, Enhancing Program Capacity stream. We have the Addressing Violence Against Women, Sexual Assault and Domestic Violence stream. And we have the Human Trafficking, Sexual Exploitation, and Vulnerable Women in the Sex Trade stream. And finally, we have the Children and Youth Advocacy Centers stream. Now, each of these streams will have their own very specific, stream-specific criteria, which we'll go into a bit later. But they also have, there's certain criteria that's the same for each and every stream. So I'll quickly give you an overview of this general criteria. First off is need. Proposals to the Civil Forfeiture Program need to demonstrate that there is this need in the community for this project. This need can be demonstrated in 2 ways, either through anecdotal information about the need in your community, or it could be through statistics that demonstrate this need. It doesn't necessarily need to be one or the other, whatever's available to you, and we do realize that in some instances statistical evidence is not available, and that's fine. But we just need in some way for us to show us that need is there, however you do that. Okay? Second is collaboration, which is very key. We need to see partnerships. No organization can do it on their own. So we want to see that you have determined what partnerships are needed to ensure the success of your project. And you'll be asked in some streams to provide support letters from those partners, but we only want to see evidence of partnerships with organizations that are directly involved in implementing the project. Okay? But most streams require proposals that do show that community support, whether it's government, police, youth organizations, schools, or other community partners, whatever community partner is relevant and necessary to ensure the success of your proposal. Now, the third one is results. We need to see what your project hopes to achieve and how you plan on measuring progress and success. Okay? We do understand that these projects are short-term, one-time only projects, so we're not looking for anything complicated in terms of result monitoring. Just whatever, if it's a simple result measurement, that's fine, but we just need to show that you're thinking about what is the end goal and how you plan on getting there. Now, budget. Budgets must align with the project description and will be assessed on how they demonstrate value for money. So we need to see that the scope and reach of the project compares to the amount of budget that you're requesting. Okay? We know it's not an exact science, but we are all good stewards of public funding here. We have to demonstrate that your project and the required expenses are good value for money. Okay? And most importantly, always refer back to the application form and application guide for further information as you're developing your proposals. Okay? So we're now going to move on to slide 9. And we'll start going into the stream-specific criteria. I'll start off with the crime reduction and crime prevention stream. We are this year funding up to $75,000 to fund crime reduction and crime prevention initiatives in British Columbia. These initiatives are projects designed to identify, assess, prevent, contain, and reduce the frequency and severity of criminal activity. Okay? Funding will be available to projects that focus on one or more of the following areas: addressing gang involvement and gun violence, targeting high-risk, vulnerable individuals, programs and services for clients with mental health or substance abuse issues who are involved or at risk of becoming involved with the criminal justice system, managing prolific and priority offenders more effectively. Preference may be given to programs targeting individuals who are already involved in gangs, criminal activity, or at imminent risk of becoming involved. Now, some preferred approaches that may include assessments of community public safety issues and risk factors, program evaluations, organizational capacity building activities, as well as coordinated response efforts by multiple agencies, whether it's law enforcement, justice agencies, social services, health, employers. Programs providing case management supports from professional personnel, including mental health and counseling, social services, healthy life skills, vocational training education, parental involvement, with the aim of reducing and mitigating the risk factors that lead to our sustained participation in gangs and criminal activity. And then finally, programs that focus on culturally appropriate programming, including Indigenous cultural activities. Okay, so now I'm going to pass this along to Sarah.
Great. So for the Indigenous Healing and Rebuilding, it is one-time grant funding for up to $30,000 per project. It's available to support projects that use holistic approaches to heal and rebuild Indigenous individuals, families, and/or communities. The projects must clearly focus on holistic approaches that address the healing and rebuilding of Indigenous families, individuals, and/or communities from trauma, crime, or victimization. So the term holistic refers to projects that address not only healing for the individual, but also healing for the family and broader community that focuses on the emotional, mental, physical, and spiritual aspects of healing and rebuilding within an impacted community, as well as other culturally identified practices that contribute to holistic healing. So trauma could include intergenerational trauma from residential schools, and some examples of projects funded in the past include healing camps, engagement with traditional arts and culture, support groups, and healing circles.
Okay.
So the next slide, I think it's slide 11. So this is Claire again, and I'm going to be speaking on the restorative justice, so serving victims through restorative justice and enhancing program capacity. So this year, the funding is available is up to $20,000 for a project, and this is to support projects that will enhance the capacity of restorative justice programs in BC, and in particular to enhance any service to victims. I think what's different again this year is in the past we had it be just CAP programs, that would be our CAP funded, the community accountability programs. However, this year it's good to note that we're opening up to any applicants that are currently delivering restorative justice programming. So I think that's just something to note that's different from the previous years. And then again this year we're really focusing on three main kind of criteria that projects that kind of meet these. One or more of the following criteria. So the first one would be partnership development at a local or regional level. So this would be projects that develop or strengthen any relationships with local and regional partners to deliver restorative justice services. So you can take an expansive view of that, but really strengthening relationship to deliver those services. Local awareness building initiatives. So these would be projects that help restorative justice programs increase awareness to their referral sources, the general public of their services. And then finally, participant supports. And this would be projects that increase program capacity to provide necessary supports for restorative justice participants from diverse populations, which could include supports related to cultural safety, sensitivity, mental health, or any number of special needs for people from different populations. One thing to note, as in past years, as is consistent with our current restorative justice community of accountability of programs, proposals cannot address issues that are related to power-based crimes. So that would include violence against women in relationships, sexual assault or hate-motivated crimes, and a more expansive version of power-based, looking at anything that there is really a serious power dynamic, any abusive situations, which can include elder abuse or child abuse situations. These are not projects or areas of work that we're ready to open up to restorative justice at this time. So just as a note for that.
Thank you, Claire. Just before we carry on here, we're hearing that some people are typing right near their phones and they don't have them on mute, which is causing some distraction for others. So please make sure you mute your phone. *6 is what you want to press to mute your phone, and that will really aid so that others are not distracted while listening to the teleconference. Okay, thank you very much. All right, now carry on to Wendy.
Hi everyone, so it's Wendy again. So I'll be addressing violence against women, domestic violence, and sexual assault stream. And if you applied last year, the criteria are very similar. So there's one-time grant funding of up to $30,000 for projects that focus on developing and or enhancing responses to sexual assault or domestic violence. Projects must clearly focus on developing and enhancing responses to at least one of the priorities, which are sexual assault or domestic violence. There are preferred criteria, but these are just preferred only. You do not need to address these in order to apply. So preference will be given to applications that address domestic violence and sexual assault against Indigenous women and girls.
Hi everybody, it's Dana here again. So the human trafficking and sexual exploitation and vulnerable women in the sex trade application. So we're currently on slide 13. So this one is focusing on one-time grant funding up to $25,000 per project. Is available for projects that address the issues related to human trafficking, sexual exploitation, and vulnerable women in the sex trade. So these projects must clearly focus on at least one of the following priorities: human trafficking, sexual exploitation, and/or vulnerable women in the sex trade. Preferred criteria, again, this is only preferred criterion and does not need to be addressed in order to apply for this funding stream. Preference will be given to projects that address Indigenous women and Indigenous youth.
Great, thank you so much, Dana. All right, so we have one final stream to address here, and that's the Child and Youth Advocacy Centers. This year, we're providing one-time grant funding of up to $60,000 per Child and Youth Advocacy Center, which will be available to enhance the capacity development or improve the service of an existing Child and Youth Advocacy Center initiative in BC. This funding is intended, as I said, to enhance existing initiatives to support early phases of development. Okay. Funding activities for CYCs will be based on the accreditation standards developed by the National Children's Alliance, standards broadly accepted in Canada. Just some examples of possible activities, and just note this is not an exhaustive list. One example is a multidisciplinary team, staff and resources to coordinate and prepare written interagency agreements, MDT protocols, and our guidelines. Another is cultural competency and diversity. Cultural and competency or diversity training for CYC staff and MDT members. Okay, forensic interviews, training in that aspect. Victim support and advocacy training. Case tracking, purchase and implementation of a case tracking or outcome measurement system, and child-focused settings. So renovations to improve the safety, accessibility, and/or functionality of a CYIC Child and Youth Advocacy Center location. Okay. All right, we're now going to move on to slide 15, tips for applicants. So we developed an application guide to be your kind of like your one-stop shop. This should be your best friend as you're going forward with this process. It will provide you with an overview of the application process. It'll lead you through all the steps of developing your application, choosing your stream, and submitting your application. Okay, it'll provide you information on the selection and review process, key dates, descriptions of each stream and their criteria, as well as frequently asked questions. Make sure you start off by reading this guideline thoroughly before you decide which stream you're going to apply for and before developing your application and completing the application form. Okay. Each stream has its very unique criteria with different set funding amounts. So you have to make sure you choose the one that best fits your project, and also make sure that your organization is eligible to apply. Make sure your application is complete and that all supporting documents, including letters of support, are included with your application email. And the completion of the 2018-2019 application form is required. Do not submit an old application form, and do not submit your own application form. We've had in the past where individuals will submit using their own format. That won't be accepted. If it's not in the 2018-2019 form, we will not be able to accept it, okay? As I mentioned, funding limits vary. Ensure your budget request does not exceed the funding limit noted under your stream criteria. Make sure that all letters, email support are submitted at the same time. And do not send in any reports or any other supporting materials not requested. All we need is a completed application form and support letters from individuals that are actually participating in the project. Moving on to slide 16. Tips for applicants continue. Make sure you cover all points that are listed in the application. Do not leave any sections blank. Okay? Be concrete, concise, and specific. Please avoid any jargon as well as acronyms. So being from government, we understand that acronyms can be sometimes hard to avoid. If you see an acronym and you're going to use it, make sure you spell it out. Okay? And be very concise. Concise is key. It can be tempting to just overly describe a particular aspect of your project, but the more concise, the better. We have a lot of applications to review and read, and you would definitely make things easier for us, and you potentially better describe your project if you're more concise and to the point. Ensure your application is complete and then all supporting documents are included. And most importantly, please sign the last page of the application before sending the application to the cfogrants@gov.bc.ca email address. Also, if possible, we recommend that you send all documents as one file, only if possible. If not possible, no worries, but it makes things a little more efficient for us if you can submit them all as one file. Moving on to slide 17, how are decisions made? Now, we have developed a formalized review and assessment process with a large number of reviewers and, as you know, team leads that are responsible for reviewing all these applications, scoring, coming to consensus before making a final decision on what will be recommended for funding. We also do an initial screening. So if a particular project does not meet the very initial basic criteria, they can be screened out right at the start. So please make sure your organization is eligible and that your project fits the stream criteria. Separate review teams are established for each funding stream, and they are individually evaluated and scored against the criteria. Decisions are made based on the highest scoring applications. However, geographic distribution will also be taken into account in making final determinations. Projects that meet the basic criteria may still not be successful in receiving funding, however, since other projects may better meet the criteria listed. And just so you know, this is a very competitive process. Last year, we received over 420 applications, totaling over 14 million in funding requested. However, we were only able to fund slightly less than half of that amount. So it's very competitive. So, keep that in mind as you're developing your proposal. Slide 18. So for those of you that are not successful, there will be an opportunity for you to speak with review team members to get feedback, to find out why you weren't successful and ways that you can strengthen your proposal for future applications. You provided contact information of a person within the branch that will be able to set up a time to discuss with you your proposal. This will happen after March 31st, 2019. Okay. In terms of timelines, slide 19. As you know, November 7th was the date that we launched the program. You'll have till December 14th at 4:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time to submit your proposals. Please make sure your proposals get in before that time on that date. We will notify all applicants by March 31st, 2019. And then April, we will we'll start booking meetings to discuss feedback with unsuccessful applicants. And then from April 1st to March 31st, 2020 is when projects can go ahead and implement. Okay. You will receive an automatic confirmation when you submit your application indicating that we received it. However, we are unable to provide information about your application prior to the March 31st date after you submitted it. Okay. All right. So now we're going to open the phone lines. So you have two options. You can submit a question either over the phone line or via the link chat through the instant messaging. Poonam will let me know what questions come through that way, and we'll try and answer as many questions as we can. Okay. All right, hold on here. I just got to take it out of lecture mode here, and we'll get started. And just remember, if you don't get a chance to ask a question, or if you realize you came up with a question too late, you can always reach out to the contact person for your relevant stream in the application guide to ask your question.
The conference is no longer in lecture mode.
All right, so let's start off on the phone line. Do we have any questions?
I have a quick question.
Go ahead.
Hello?
Yep, go ahead.
Hi, quick question. Can organizations apply under different streams, or is the organization only allowed to apply under one stream?
You can apply under multiple streams for different projects. It can't be for the same project. However, if you have two distinct separate projects that fall under different streams, then you are able to apply under different streams.
Quick question.
Yep, go ahead.
Who was the contact? I couldn't hear very well. The contact with crime reduction and crime prevention.
That information is listed in the program guidelines. If you go into the program guidelines under page, let's see here, starting at page 8, you'll find all the information relevant to that stream, including the contact information, which would be at the final page of that stream listing.
Okay, thank you.
Hello, this is Louisa with Vancouver Rape Relief and Women's Shelter. Thanks for the really helpful presentation. I had a question about the letters of support and references. I intend on applying for the same project that I applied for last year, and I contacted several community partners to provide references last year, and they're still current and relevant. Is it okay if I use the same references again for this application, or I just feel uncomfortable asking them to redo the same similar letter?
You would need to have confirmation that we need to know that they are still on board, because we don't know whether that was a year ago, so things might have changed for them, and so we need to know that they are on board and are going to be supporting you on this new iteration of the project. So that has to be clear in the letter. So it might be just as simple as updating the letter, but however, we would need to see that this is still the case, because it's been a year, so a lot might have changed in that year.
Thank you.
Yep.
Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
Can I ask a question? If we've also applied for National Crime Prevention Center or strategy funding, and I'm not clear as to when we're going to find out about that funding, how do we contextualize it in the budget on this application? This is Elaine Carroll from Miscellaneous Production Society.
That's a very good question, actually. Unfortunately, we can't really take that into consideration. So we kind of just have to adjudicate your proposal on what we see. If you find out that you're getting this funding before the adjudication process is complete, you're going to have to let us know. And if that is the case, then we'll take your proposal out of the stream.
So, but what if both pots of funding are required for a larger project?
Well, then it doesn't. Yeah, that's okay. I see what you mean then. So you're saying that both would be. I would note that in your project description that this funding will be supplementing other funding to develop a proposal. So that just make sure you note that in the project description.
Okay, thank you very much.
Hi there, I have a question.
Hold on one second. Oh, sorry, just one second.
Sorry to interrupt you. Sorry, just on Elaine's question around the funding, I think one other things that we've recommended is if you can find a piece within the project somehow that's standalone or a little bit separate, like it's not so integrated. I understand sometimes you need to show that you have funding from one source to fund another, but if there was a way you could write a proposal that does have a little bit of a standalone piece in it, we would recommend you try to do that as well. That might just assist you in trying to get funding so that you're not dependent on PSC for this project to go forward. I don't know if that's possible with your project, but we would recommend it.
No, you know, I understand how you want us to sort of silo off our projects, but it's becoming a little bit ridiculous because when we went to the National Crime Prevention Strategy with a proposal, we said we would be getting some money from the province. You know, we don't know what amount, of course, and we don't know, you know, it's becoming increasingly difficult. I've been writing grants for more than 40 years, and I've applied all over the world for money, and this is becoming increasingly difficult because we you know, not having face-to-face meetings, not being able to sit in a room with our peers and discuss, you know, the issues of getting these projects off the ground when you're working with, you know, off-the-chart at-risk youth, and it's becoming increasingly difficult to fund these projects. I feel like I'm chasing my tail trying to, put together these packages and give you a piece and give another funder a piece and another funder a piece. I wish there was more coordination between funders so that we're not spending most of our time writing grants rather than most of our time in the community dealing with our at-risk client groups.
Yeah, no, we totally understand your concerns there, and we wish that we could do something, but unfortunately we can't address that on this call. But that's definitely something that needs to be looked at. We agree, but unfortunately we cannot address it at this moment. But yeah, as Claire mentioned, I would take her advice if possible. If you can silo off a part of it that we could fund through our funding, so it's not reliant on the national strategy funding, that would be ideal.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi there, I have a question.
Yep, go ahead.
Hello. My name is Parminder Slora. I'm calling from Mosaic. I just needed a little bit of clarification with regards to the continuation of funding for projects that have already been granted. So what I'm understanding is that there isn't funding for continuation, but if it was different activities that were identified and it was a new project built up from something that was delivered previously, that would be possibly funded or not?
So there is nothing against us funding a continuation of a program. Obviously, it's not ideal because we need to see some sort of sustainability aspect to it, but we can provide continuing funding, so we can. If you applied last year, received funding, you can try again for that same project to carry on that project this year. That is definitely allowed.
Okay. Another question that I had, just along the lines of the application, there isn't a word count, and are there any restrictions on how much information we can provide?
There is no restriction. However, as I mentioned earlier, we really recommend that you be very concise and keep your descriptions to an amount and level that makes it easy to read, clearly gets to your point, and so you don't want reviewers to get lost in the details. Okay, so you want to really work at being very concise and to the point and keeping your descriptions to a minimum, so that what you're trying to do and what you're trying to communicate comes across clearly. Okay, I think that's the best way you can describe it. But there is no actual set word limit. However, it's in your best interest to be very concise.
Thank you for that.
No problem.
So maybe I will take a couple of the questions that have come in through the messenger. So I'll start with some of the questions that maybe have a bit wider applicability. So a couple of people asked some related questions here about whether an organization can apply for multiple streams, and also whether one organization can apply. Sorry, we just have the hold music kind of coming up.
I'm going to pause here for a second.
Okay.
Somebody's put their phone on hold, it sounds like. I don't think that they can hear us at this point. Unfortunately, that's what the beeping sound is. So we could go to lecture mode briefly, just if it continues, and we'll open it up for the questions.
Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah.
The conference is in lecture mode.
Okay, so the question, the first part of that question then is, can one organization apply for projects on multiple streams?
Yes, as long as it's for separate projects, you cannot apply for under multiple streams for the same project.
And then sort of a related question would be, can the same organization apply for multiple projects within the same stream?
Yes, they can. I would just remember though that as I mentioned before, there is fairly limited funding. We received over 420 applications last year, and we're only able to fund less than half of that. So I would not recommend submitting multiple. It's up to you, but I'd be very strategic with your applications and really work on submitting your strongest applications rather than submitting a whole bunch of applications just hoping one gets approved.
Yeah, on that note, just like remembering that generally if you submit a few, we're going to take that into consideration because we are trying to spread funding out across as widely as we can. So, it might not be the project that you think you want funded that gets funded. So just being very mindful of the projects that you're selecting to try to put in, because we do try to consider spreading it out as much as we can if we can. So.
And then we had another question here about whether an exact start date needs to be specified for projects.
Yes, you need to let us know what the timelines are for your implementation of your project, when you're going to start, and when you're going to finish, and any other key milestones along the way. These timelines are not written in stone. So if something comes up, you need to adjust your timelines. That is always possible, but we need to see that you've thought ahead and you've kind of got a structure and idea of kind of when it's going to start, when it's going to finish, and when you're going to be able to report back on the results.
And we have a question about one-time funding, specifically what is meant by that, and whether applicants can apply for funding for the same project as last year.
Yes, so as I mentioned before, one time only means that because we're awarding you funding now, that's it. You get this certain amount for the year. There's no other guaranteed funding after that point. You would have to apply again to get additional funding, which you can do.
And is collaboration required for any of the grants?
There are certain streams where collaboration is not as important as others. However, it is always in every proposal's best interest to have collaboration. That will definitely increase your score and make it a stronger proposal. If you've shown that you have partners that you're going to work with or consult with along the way, it's very rare moments where a better on board.
And I think in some of the applications, if you look at them closely, it actually has specific questions on collaboration. So on those ones, it's really important to have partners on board with your project.
So yeah, once again, make sure you read the criteria within the guidelines closely to see exactly what your particular stream that you're applying for is asking for on that front.
Okay, and another question here is whether community-based research is eligible for funding as part of a project. So the example given is that they need to do some research on the depth of the issue in the domestic violence file. So community-based research, basically, whether that's eligible for funding.
It's a project.
Once again, I think it depends on the stream. So once again, look at the criteria, and if there's nothing in this criteria that mentions that you can't submit a proposal in that regard, then please feel free to do so.
And the sexual assault domestic violence stream is very wide open in terms of criteria. You just need to indicate if you're focusing on sexual assault or domestic violence, so it allows a lot of leeway in what you can apply for.
And I think the same with human trafficking.
Yeah, the sexual exploitation and vulnerable women in the sex trade. So it's very open to either one of those three.
Certain streams, short of justice, is not that open. So once again, just review the guidelines and the criteria for each stream, and if you still have any questions, feel free to contact the individuals listed under the streams.
And we've had a couple questions around partnerships, specifically what kinds of partnerships that we're looking for.
As I mentioned, we're looking for partnerships where the partner is directly involved in implementing, that they're a crucial source of resources or information or human resources, whatever it is. It's all going to depend on the particular project. It's going to depend on the stream. But partners that are directly involved are needed to implement your project successfully.
Okay, and earlier on there was a general question about who the best person to speak with would be to help applicants determine the best stream that they should apply for.
That's a good question. I would either email the CFO email box, and someone will get a hold of you that way, or determine I think you can determine which stream most closely matches your proposal. Call that individual. They should help you, and if they can't help you, they'll be able to put you in touch with someone who can.
And a general question about whether the application process and criteria for this year are similar to last year.
There are some similarities for certain streams. Other streams like crime reduction and crime prevention and restorative justice have been revised and updated. However, the domestic violence, sexual assault, and the human trafficking, sexual exploitation of vulnerable women in the sex trade streams are fairly similar to last year. However, once again, I would not go off last year's criteria at all. Just focus on reading and reviewing the guidelines for this year and go off what's in there. Okay, so I think maybe where this might be connected to is where can I just submit my proposal from last year, but please make sure you review your proposal from last year and make sure it fits and meets the criteria for this year. Don't make any presumptions in that regard.
So we have some questions that are more sort of specific to particular streams. I don't know if we...
We'll just ask a little more.
So I'll start with one of those. So for the sexual assault stream, can this include proactive approaches to reducing incidences?
Yes, the short answer is yes. Again, that stream is very open, so as long as it does include responses to domestic violence or sexual assault, you're welcome to apply.
And we've had a couple questions as well around letters of support, basically what we're asking for there and whether those letters are different from partnerships.
I think what we mean by letters of support are basically partnerships, okay? We don't necessarily need to see if, say, a certain organization supports you and is approves of what you're planning on doing. That is not so important to us. We want to see if there's an organization that you need to work with closely that needs to provide input and has some role in helping you implement this project, then we need to hear from them and see that they're on board, that they're gonna work with you to implement this project. That's what's important to us and what we're looking for in these support letters. So organizations are actually going to support you in implementing this project.
Yeah, I think most of the other questions are starting to get into specifics of streams, and it might be more beneficial to contact the contact person listed in the program, the application guide, sorry. So I think it might be more beneficial to direct those questions to that contact person to give you more targeted specific responses.
Okay, so
conference is no longer in lecture mode.
So we'll go back to the phone line and see if there's any further questions on the phone line.
Hi there, this is Andrea Thompson from Discharge Society.
Hello.
I found it really helpful when you gave a couple of examples about the child and youth advocacy centers in terms of training and about, in terms of reference for a group. Would you be able to offer a couple of other examples kind of across any of the streams about the kinds of projects that would meet the criteria around sustainability?
I think if you want, I would recommend that you reach out to the contact person related to that stream for that type of specific question. Once again, it's quite wide open for a number of these streams. So I would, if you have some specific questions in that regard, I would just reach out to the relevant stream and they can help you in that regard.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? Okay. So once again, I'll just say that if any other questions come to mind, once again, please feel free to reach out to the contact people noted in the guidelines. And once again, please review the guidelines carefully. And I find if you review those guidelines carefully and take everything into consideration, that will really help you build a strong proposal. Okay. And we look forward to receiving your applications. And thanks so much for your time today. And we wish you all the best of luck. Oh, hold on one second here. Hold on one sec.
Sorry, we've a couple other questions have come in. So I'll pose these to the group. So one that just came in, much of the discussion is around community-based programs. Are there any tips for schools that might be different?
No, I can't see there being anything related to schools in particular that would be different. I think once again, it all depends on what type of project that you want to are you proposing and the specifics around that. Without that additional knowledge, we couldn't really provide additional input on that. But I can't see it being any different. You know, whether you need partners, whether you need a budget that provides good value for money, that's all going to be the same, regardless of whether you're a school, whether you're a community organization, or whether you're police or whatnot. So all the tips we've given you today should be relevant to whatever type of organization you are.
And I'll just ask one more question here because I think it might be beneficial to a lot of people tuning in. So if an organization has various departments, such as childcare, food security, clinical, can these various departments be considered as partners since their functions are different from one another?
I mean, I would consider that all part of the same organization. We want to see as well partners from outside the organization that would be needed to successfully implement a project. I think that there should be sign that there's some sort of partnership outside of the organization itself. Of course, it's good to see that there's multiple areas within an organization working together to develop a proposal. However, we'd also like to see that there's been some outreach outside the organization to develop whatever partnerships are necessary to implement a project on top of what is happening within the organization.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Hi, it's Bernadette Brown from Fort Nelson, and I am with the Fort Nelson Family Development Society, and I am the child advocate for the PEACE program, one of them, and our program was formerly known as the CWWA, the Children Who Witness Abuse program. And what I am actually interested in is regarding the letters of support. Now, a lot of our work, we go into the schools with the children, unless the children are able, to come into our office. So through that, are we able to get, letters of support from the schools, like the principals or the district superintendent with whom we collaborate with?
Yeah, I think that would be that would make sense to get letters of support from the schools that you'd be working closely with. Because obviously, I think that would be crucial to implementing a project such as that.
Okay, and then there's another question that I don't know if it was answered yet, but it has me piqued, and it was from Sarah Gardner, and she's also local, but it says, can you provide examples of projects for domestic violence awarded in previous years? I don't know if that was answered, and I just kind of missed it. Bad line connections.
Yeah, I don't think we can really give that type of example over the phone like this.
Okay.
I'm not.
It's posted. So all previous projects that have been funded, there is lists and descriptions of those projects, kind of a high level, but posted on the website. So if you go to the CFO, you can see previous years, and they have a small description of the project. So that might help you with some ideas going forward. But again, like Brett kind of reiterated, just make sure that you're looking at the criteria for this year and ensuring that it is depending on what you're applying for, it's matching up with the criteria for this year specifically, just in case something has changed from year to year. So
okay, and so once again, for the PEACE program, the program for children and youth experiencing violence, I can get letters of support. So say through victim services and the RCMP or the schools, that will be considered letters of support.
So can I ask you, when you say for the PEACE programming, are you talking about funding a service? Is that what you're referring to? Because that is actually not, I don't believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Brett, but these are supposed to be project-based projects, not, this can't, the funding can't go to supplement programs or services that you have in place. It'd have to be a unique project. It could be a project that's related to your PEACE program, but not to actually fund with these
Yeah,
programs.
Yeah,
no,
that's
that's
correct.
what I'm meaning. Like it can add kind of and join onto it, but it can't actually like
Fund the
lead to
service.
program.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so like, yeah, if you had activities that are kind of outside the service, like, you know, you wanted to do a project, I don't know, something that's just unique and different but relatable to the project. Yeah, I just wanted to highlight that for you.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, that's my question. So thank you.
Thank you.
And just for the violence against women and sexual assault stream, the criteria for this year is exactly the same as last year. So if you wanted to look at previous year's applications, last year would probably be the most relevant and useful if you wanted to see what was funded last year.
Okay, any other questions? Or if not, we'll wrap things up. Okay, all right. Well, thank you very much once again, and thank you to everyone here in the room. And we wish you the best of luck in moving forward with developing any applications if you choose to do so. And once again, please read the guidelines and feel free to ask questions to contact people within the guidelines if you have any questions. Okay, best of luck.